Okay, good evening, folks. It is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022 at 6 p.m. We're in the council chambers at the city of Platteville City Hall, and I'm calling the regular meeting of the Common Council to order. Nicola, we'll start with roll call.
Barbara Dawes,
Here.
Ken Killian,
Here.
Eileen Nichols,
Here.
Kathy Kopp,
Here.
Jason Otts,
Here.
Lynn Parrott,
Lynn is excused.
Excused.
She's under the weather tonight.
okay, thank you, and Todd Casper,
Here.
thank you.
Okay, and as we start tonight, I would I have my I voted sticker on, but I want to reach out and say a big thank you to all of the people who set up for the absentee voting in this chamber the last few weeks, 2 weeks, and the job of setting up at the Broski and also at the Ulsvik, and the incredible number of volunteers that I saw this morning. And unfortunately, I didn't see any coffee cake or any other kind of good food around, but
They were hiding that from you.
I think they were hiding that. But at any rate, special thanks to our staff and our volunteers who are conducting the election today. So let's move on to the consideration of the consent agenda. We have council minutes from the regular and the special meetings on October 25th, payment of bills. We have financial report for October. I have no appointments for boards and commissions tonight. Licenses, we have 1 and 2 year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol, taxi driver license as in your packet. Financial management policy update as it deals with financial institutions and signatories, and canceling our second meeting in December, which would fall on December 27th. All of these can be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature, or if you want something held for a separate discussion, please let me know.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Eileen to approve the consent agenda as presented. Nicola will vote.
Dawes,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Kopp,
Yes.
Otts,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, and I'll make a special welcome to students that are in our audience tonight. We have several students who are here from UW Platteville who have the requirement and perhaps privilege of attending a meeting, public meeting. So welcome. And I have no other citizens' comments, observations, and petitions. The only information I've received relates to agenda items. Is there any council member that has an announcement? Or I have heard that the pasty sale went well and that the mine tours went well. Any other?
So the only other thing I'll bring up is coming up the next 2 weeks is kind of our budgetary public hearing meetings. So November 14th, so next Monday here at 5 o'clock is when we do kind of the public presentation for the public. Obviously with that time, if you're not able to make it, we do record that. So there will be a Zoom meeting that essentially get posted onto YouTube and to our website that you can kind of listen. But then the same presentation will be given again then during the kind of public hearing requirements that we have for the budget. And that'll be November 22nd. So there's kind of 2 opportunities to kind of hear everything kind of going on with the finalized budget before it's then presented to the council and then asked to be adopted. So there you go.
Okay, and Howard, do you want to give any update on the West Main situation?
Pipe is in the ground. They're working hard on it. And the intent is to have the road open by the end of next week with a partial layer of asphalt for driving on and plowing for the winter.
All right, we will then move on to reports that were in our packet. There was a police and fire commission report. Kathy?
Nothing more to add.
Museum board, Eileen?
I would just add to what you said about the pasty sale. It was an incredible sale. Thank you, everyone, for purchasing pasty to support the museums. November 19th, excuse me, is a pickup date from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. And the other thing is the horse-drawn carriage rides are coming up in December, and you can go online and register for those. So please take advantage of that. People that have done it. It's a lot of fun.
Commission on Aging, Kathy.
Nothing further to report.
The Housing Authority Board, Eileen.
Nothing to add.
The other reports in the packet were the Water and Sewer Financial Report, the Airport Financial Report, the Task Force on Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Update, and Department Progress Reports. Does anybody have questions or comments on any of these reports? Okay, then we'll move on to our only action item tonight. This is the award for financial advising services. We had done a request for proposal, and I believe, Adam, that you and the committee are ready to make a recommendation.
They did. So the committee met last week and had an opportunity to kind of review the two finalists. And again, that was Ellers and Robert W. Baird. And what I asked the committee for was I kind of stayed out of this one as a neutral party and asked the committee to make a decision on what they saw from not only the two council members, but obviously with Director Maurer handling the majority of our administrative finance ends, asked them out of the two firms, which one, they wanted to make a formal recommendation to the council. I think both firms were it was very, what I would say, neck and neck. There were a lot of pros and cons with, I don't even want to say cons. There were more pros and discussions about, both firms and switching or looking at that. And at the end of the decision that the kind of members made was that they would recommend that the council award the RFP to Ellers for 3 years and direct the city manager then to enter into a new contract. That would be for 3 years. And then in 3 years, we do the same process again.
Okay, any council member, first of all, any comments from the subcommittee, council members, Nichols or Killian? Any comments or?
I was satisfied with the hearings that we had, discussions that we had, so that's my comment.
Okay, any questions from council members?
I want to echo what Adam said. I think that both of the firms gave excellent presentations. And I think either one of them would have been good for the city. But I'm quite happy with the recommendation that's coming down.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I move to award the financial advising services RFP to Ellers and to authorize the city manager to enter into an official agreement with Ellers for 3 years.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Eileen and a second by Kathy to award the financial advising services contract to Ellers and to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement on this 3-year proposal. Nicola will vote.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Otts,
Yes.
Casper.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that is the only action item on our agenda tonight. And now we'll move into the information and discussion section of our agenda. And the first item on that is presentation of the concept plan for the fire station from our consultant, Five Bugles Design, and Adam will let you make that introduction.
Yeah, I'm going to kick it off and then I will kind of pitch it over to Laura and she'll go from there and we'll kind of go for it. But obviously in February of 2021, Five Bugles Design, along with the Public Administration Associates, presented during a Common Council work session at the Broski Event Center, a finalized Platteville Fire Department operational overview, as well as a space needs analysis for a new City of Platteville fire station. The presentation provided several organizational recommendations about considering the needs of the Platteville Fire Department for the next 50 years. Within the space need analysis portion of the fire department comprehensive analysis, the study projected the need for a facility of around 31,900 square feet. The study reviewed 3 locations: the current site of the fire station, OE Gray Learning Center, and the Platteville Armory. As you can see, there was a breakdown of each of the sites from the study. The current fire station, some of the concerns obviously there with that they would need an 8-bay to obviously hold all of the equipment, and that would completely take up the site. So that is one of the main reasons why that site was no longer looked at. There obviously was no room for an apparatus support, no drive-through capabilities, no on-site parking, and the structure would be several stories in order to accommodate the program needs. The Platteville Armory was then looked at. The site does have good access to Water Street. There is potential room for training on site. The 6 apparatus bay nearly fills the site, and 8 bay would completely take up the site. It would require a 3-story concept facility. There would be challenges with parking, challenges with pedestrian traffic. There'd be no room for future growth and limited or no room for additional training spaces. The last site that they looked at was OE Gray Learning Center. It did meet all the program goals that they were looking for. It had additional space for a community room, had spaces for additional training on site, and they expressed the existing facility would need to be raised due to the age of the building, decontamination requirements, cost to retrofit the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, load requirements would be cost prohibitive. When the council made the official motion to purchase OE Gray Community Learning Center located at 155 West Lewis Street in June of 2021, it was with the understanding the fire department comprehensive analysis report completed in February of 2021 indicated the property as a location for a new fire station with the possibility for the property to serve other recreational or civic uses. In May of 2022, the Common Council authorized the approval of 5 Bugles Design to be the architectural firm to provide professional design services, which will include schematic design, design development, construction documents, and bidding and construction administration services for a new fire station to be located at the current location of the OE Gray Community Learning Center. One aspect of the design was to consider whether the fire station could have additional training / spaces for service-based organizations that are currently there. A community room space with a commercial kitchen has been proposed within the concept plan, which you will see in more detail. During the summer of 2022, city staff has been working with 5 Bugles Design on a concept plan for the new fire station. 5 Bugles Design is in attendance tonight and will be presenting the results of those efforts and provide an opportunity to garner feedback from council members, staff, and the community regarding the proposed concept plan. City staff continues to work with 5 Bugles Design on the completion of the USDA requirements in order to officially receive the $7 million appropriation awarded to the city of Platteville for utilization towards a new fire station. One of the reasons we received this appropriation was due to the work done within the study and securing the OE Gray Learning Center as under complete city ownership. Another fiscal impact in consideration, the utilization of OE Gray Learning Center site was the space needs analysis showcased the need for a parcel of land around 3 acres to construct a new fire station. Due to OE Gray Learning Center being under the ownership of the school district, this property was already taken off the tax roll. So by purchasing it, the city was not decreasing the assessed value of a property or taking any additional property off the tax roll. Another question I know has been asked of staff and common council is whether OE Gray Building Learning Center could remain as it stands or be retrofitted to have a new fire station attached to the building. That's something that obviously we'll talk in the presentation, so I'll defer that. Again, we'll talk a little bit about the cost, but estimations continue to project a fire station cost between about 10 and 15 million, but will not be able to be finalized until the architects are able to move forward with the schematic design phase of the project. We're going to get a little more detail. We've been able to kind of narrow that down. So I am now going to pitch it over to Laura and let her kind of go over the presentation that she put together.
Okay, and I would encourage anybody in the council chambers to direct their attention to the screen on the south wall.
Yep, should be good.
Awesome. All right. First of all, thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name is Laura Eisnagel. I am an architect with Wendell and 5 Bugles. As Adam mentioned, I actually was able to do this study for you all in 2020 and 2021, and I've been with your design committee over the last 6 months as we've worked toward this concept design. So without further ado, we'll dive in. The very first thing we're going to do is just kind of give you a history, kind of taking a step back and looking a little bit more detail of the things that we have gone over for the past 6 months. We're going to talk about programming, which is figuring out exactly what goes into the fire station. We're going to review our concept designs that we looked at in order to get us to where we are right now. Talk about some of the other reporting and things that we did on the side besides just the design concept to again, get us to where we are today, and then talk about potentially what would come next. What would be our schedule moving forward? So kind of looking at that history, in June of 2022, we started with concept meetings in our programming, and we'll talk about programming in just a minute, but basically we were able to do programming in June of 2022 and then start coming back with concepts in July of 2022. After we did our initial concepts, we then took tours of some different facilities just to confirm our program, to make sure that the spaces that we were considering were spaces that your department actually needed, and to make sure everyone understands the size and the scale when we talk about different sizes of different rooms. After those tours, we came back again and reevaluated some of the concepts and kind of narrowed it down and started honing in on one that the department really thought was the best use of their space and would be the best for their department. Following that selection of that concept, we then wrote a report to the USDA, which again, Adam mentioned, was in order to allow us to secure that $7 million that would be appropriated. And then it would also help if we were to ask the USDA for any sort of a loan, a long-term loan for this building. Since that time, we've also had a survey done of the existing property to verify all of our property lines are accurate and to make sure we're looking at the right property lines. And then now we are here today in November just asking for permission to move into schematic design, which really and truly is the very first phase of design. All this I like to call our -1 phase, just kind of getting us geared up to actually design a building. So the very first step, like I said, is programming. So in our programming, we did this in 2020 and 2021, but what we wanted to do when we came back in 2022 is make sure that things hadn't changed and to make sure that we really captured what are the needs for your community and for your fire department. So what we look at is we look at every single room we have ever put in a fire station at any time and talk through, is this something that your department needs? How would it be utilized? What would the scale be for your specific department? We start talking about the future. So you don't have, let's say you don't have a decontamination process now. Do you want it in the future? What other things do we have to consider? How are you going to grow as a community? What we don't want to have happen is we don't want to build something and then a year later discover, oh, it's too small. We want to make sure we build it right the first time. And so, like I said, we already did this a couple years ago, but we wanted to make sure that we reevaluated it to make sure nothing changed. So it was just a confirmation of the program. And what we discovered was actually, we did a really great job in 2020, and they really didn't change very much. As you can see there, we changed it about 200 square feet, but for the most part, we stayed right on, which is a really great checks and balance system. From there, we start looking at concept designs. So a concept design is not a schematic design. It's basically a bubble diagram. It's just making sure that we are understanding what are our relationships, what are our sizes, what things touch one another in terms of adjacencies, what sizes do we need, and then each color indicates a different department within the facility. So we have our apparatus space, our apparatus support spaces, administration, training, staff support, which includes dormitories, kitchen spaces, circulation, and then mechanical spaces. So the very first site that we wanted to look at, whenever there is an existing building, we always have to consider, is it worth renovating this facility? So a really important thing to keep in mind is that E.O. Gray was never meant to be an emergency response facility. It was meant to be a school. So it's strange because it was actually too big, but it's actually too small. So when you start looking at the length of the facility, anytime you have that long of a facility, getting responders through and out to an apparatus bay adds time. We can't change how long it takes to get the call into a department, and we can't change how long it takes to get from the department doors to the call because of speed limits and because of stop lights at traffics. The only thing that we can control is how fast our responders can get through the facility. So that's incredibly critical whenever we're designing an emergency services facility. The other thing that we have as a challenge on this particular property, as you can see there, is that the building is very close to 3 of our property lines, which means that there's really not a lot of space in terms of future growth. So we're stuck exactly where it is. And so, yeah, it just ends up being a very challenging site to renovate, but we did consider it. So looking at how this would work is you can kind of see the gray outline as the existing facility, and then the tan outline underneath would be our proposed new facility if we were to renovate as much as possible. And as you can see, in order to shrink it down to make those response times work, we had some extra spaces we'd have to demo. And some of the large spaces we'd have to take away in order to get an apparatus bay that would attach to this. So on the left-hand side there, where that nub kind of sticks out in the tan, that's our apparatus bay. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is this site does slope down when you're going to the northwest corner. So our visitor parking is actually downhill from where, oops, oh, got some buttons here. Our visitor parking is actually downhill from where our facility would have to be in this particular facility, especially because of how close the building is to the roadways. So then what we would have to do is we'd have to put up some sort of a retaining wall to divide the site to make sure that people can properly get from one area to the other. And then our visitors, whenever they are entering into the facility, they would actually cross over top of a response apron. Or not the response apron, the return apron. This would be worse if they were crossing over the response apron. We really don't want that to happen. But even coming over the return apron, then we have challenges with apparatus coming back in, people crossing, if they're training or if we're washing any sort of apparatus on that back, how are we moving people safely around the site? The other thing that we have a challenge at is our front door is actually at the back of this facility in order to make it so that the front door would be closest to the visitor parking as possible. And last but not least, our front apron ends up being very shallow. We want to make sure that we have enough space on our front apron to pull our largest apparatus out onto that apron. So those are some site challenges that we have. So just kind of recapping that, it's really challenging for pedestrian circulation. There's really no room for future expansion around the building. There's no room for on-site training, which again is incredibly critical whenever we're talking about emergency services designs. And then when you start thinking about how much would have to be demoed in order to make this facility work, we would be doing a lot of demolition in order to save a building, to build a 100-year building for this department. So looking at how this project would lay out, again, if we were to use this existing facility, we would be doing a single-story construction facility. We would not have an opportunity for a basement. And we would not want to go up to a second level just because of the existing foundations. We would have to demo a chunk of the facility on the north side. Our administration and community training room there in the yellow and the purple, that's on the back side of the building again, which is just a challenge. We do have space though for our decon area that's shown in the red as our apparatus support. And then we would have to demo just a little bit on the bottom in order to make sure that we had all the spaces that we need and no extra spaces. So in addition to all of that, we would still need to consider doing a new roof, new electrical, plumbing, HVAC, windows. It is an old facility. So when we started looking at all of these considerations, we kind of thought it's probably best for us just to start a new facility on this site. So right away, we started looking at 3 different concepts. The 3 different concepts really started to explore that slope of the site that we had mentioned and started to explore how the responders are going to be getting to the site from their homes or from their work. And then how are they going to respond out to a call? So from these, after we looked at these 3 facilities, we were able to go and tour 2 different facilities within the state of Wisconsin. So we went to the Greenville Fire Department up in Greenville, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Appleton area. And then we also toured the Suamico Fire Station, which is just north of the Green Bay area. These 2 particular facilities were considered because of their staffing models, very similar to your staffing model here for your fire department. They are considered because of their decontamination process, and the overall scale of the facility is actually very similar to what we are building or what we are proposing building for the Platteville Fire Department. So overall, we ended up having a great group of people there that day, and it came across as a very positive experience. Again, it's one of those things that we can walk into a room and say, okay, this is what size your training room is. Is this the appropriate size training room? Yes or no? These are the decon spaces that we are talking about. Does this make a little bit more sense now? So overall, I thought that was a very positive day, a lot of fun. So next, we got down to the nitty-gritty and decided to hone in on one of the 3 concepts that we had looked at earlier. And it was actually one of the ones that we had proposed in 2020 and 2021. And we came up with the proposed concept that we would like to move forward with. So this would be a 2-story facility with a basement alternate. It would have 7 full drive-through apparatus bays and a support garage. So we're looking at somewhere between 31,000 square feet and 39,000 square feet. So looking at how this site plan will function, We would have our visitor parking on the north side of, or on the south side of the facility, which is closest to town. So when people are actually coming from the downtown area, it would be the first thing that they are able to access would be that visitor parking. We then have our visitor entry, which is again, away from that response apron. So it's a nice safe area, but they can kind of see what's going on. And we have it again on the front side of the building. We have our responder parking on the back. As we were looking at where a lot of the responders will be coming from, it makes sense to keep them in the back, and also for safety of moving them through and around the site. We liked having them on the back side of the property, which I'm calling the back, which is the north. We then have a direct access for them into. So when people are responding, if there are visitors using the facility, we don't have a cross of the two groups of people. They are coming in from the north and from the south sides of the facility. We have a response apron that is able to go out directly onto Adams Street and kind of get there to get the fastest response times possible from the site. And we have a return apron coming in from the north that will allow us to have drive-through apparatus bays for all 7 of those bays. Then finally, on that north west corner of the property, we have some space that we're able to do on-site water retention and then on-site future training. So if we wanted to do any sort of future training, like a splash tower or a fire tower, anything like that, we would have that opportunity here. More. So looking at how this floor plan is proposed to be laid out, again, the blue is apparatus spaces. So we are showing that we would be having 7 drive-through apparatus space for our fire department or for our fire apparatus. And then in the upper right-hand corner, we're showing a smaller garage. So those would be the non-response vehicles that are support vehicles. We have in the red, we have our decontamination process, making sure that our individuals who are responding to a fire can come back and clean themselves before they go home, before they go back to work, or before they go upstairs to sleep if they are sleeping here overnight. We have our administration spaces in the yellow, so we can make sure that they are there with the public access, but also can be with the people in the back, with their department in the back. And then we have the purple space in the bottom right-hand corner, which is our training room, our EOC, which is Emergency Operations Center, and then our community room. So looking at the second floor of the proposed facility is our staff support spaces. So these would include some dorm rooms, all gender toilet and shower facilities, an exercise room, a kitchen, dining, and a day room, which is also similar to like a living room for those people who would be living there a third of their life, basically. So looking at then what we would be proposing is also an alternate for a basement. Our basement would include classrooms, some training, some additional storage, because we don't have a lot of storage in the rest of the facility, and then EOC support spaces. So often when you have that emergency response area, you need different breakout groups. So this would offer us an opportunity for smaller breakout groups throughout the basement area. So one thing to keep in mind is, like I said, we're in our -1 phase. We start going now hopefully into schematic design. And that's when we start really honing in this plan, adding windows, doors, and walls. And often these plans start shrinking down. So when you see the square foot numbers, keep in mind, it'll never be bigger than that. Our goal is to start making sure that we're compacting it as much as possible, but still making sure it's functional for your department. These are just some examples of where they have come down. Some of them are more extreme than others, but we always try and, get as much of the fluff out of there as possible. So looking at what we are proposing at this point in terms of probable costs, we are proposing right around 13.4 million if we were talking about our base building. And then if we did add that alternate for the basement, we'd be looking at about 16.3 at the current dollar numbers, and then our current square foot sizes. This did include a little bit of inflation though, too, as the last couple of years have been very challenging in terms of building costs. So like I said, in addition to doing the actual concept design, we had a lot of reporting that we had to do. So we officially have our USDA report ready to go. We have submitted it into the city. We can submit it to the USDA. In addition to the USDA report, we also had to do an environmental report, which just looked at the different habitats that are on the property, if there was any sort of wetland issues, all those types of things are discovered in the environmental report. The only thing that we are waiting on to wrap up that environmental report is feedback from any native tribes that might have had an interest in this property. I don't foresee that being an issue since we already have a building there, but we always have to reach out to make sure that they don't have any issues. And we should be hearing, the deadline for them to hear back is in about 2 weeks. So like I said, then in addition to the USDA report, we also did the site survey. Generally speaking, we don't do our site surveys until schematic design. Because the GIS with the cities and counties is usually pretty accurate, but knowing the interesting history of this piece of property, it was suggested that we get our site survey done sooner than later. So we got our site survey done. And it kind of just confirmed where all the property lines were, and we are ready to move forward with design on this piece of property. Last but not least, we also did reach out to the geotechnical engineers. So geotechnical engineers are the people who will come and test the soils to see what kinds of foundations we need to have, if we have to have drain tile around the footings of our floors, if there are any surprises that we would like to find out about now before we start breaking ground. So we have received proposals from 3 different geotechnical companies. We made a recommendation to the city, and as soon as we give them permission to start the borings, they can get on site to go do those. So kind of looking forward as to what would happen next. As you can see up here, concepts is that very first phase, again, the -1 phase. And our next step would be to move into schematic design process, then into design development, construction documents, bidding, construction, and eventually occupancy. One thing that we do want to consider, though, is if we are looking forward to how we are going to build this facility is the construction delivery method. So if we are choosing to go with a general contractor versus a construction manager, if we are going to go with a construction manager, it would be most beneficial to get those folks on board sooner than later. It's really great to have them involved throughout the design process to make sure that they can assist with any constructability. They will keep an eye on the really volatile bidding climate to make sure that if there's a type of building and structural system that needs to be changed out because we can't get a supply, they would be able to help us with that and make sure that we can, have that flexibility. They would also do a lot of estimating for us. The question always comes up about the cost for a CM versus a general contractor. In a CM, they do have a fee for the cost of work. It's generally between 1 to 2 to 3% of the cost of work. But historically, when we look at the overall cost of the project of a GC project versus a CM project, they end up being about the same because the general contractor would still have that fee. You just don't see it up front. You see it when you look at the total cost. So how long does everything take? So each of our phases generally takes about 2 to 3 months. So if we are looking at schematic design beginning in mid-November, we would be back here again in mid-January, hoping to move into design development. And then from that point, again, about 8 weeks later, we would be here again asking to move into construction documents. Once we are in construction documents, that takes about 2.5 to 3 months. Since we are getting our money through the USDA, we will have to make sure that we submit our final plans to the USDA for approval. That takes about a month on their side. So we put them in that construction document phase. We would send them our 90 to 95% set. It's just a kind of a confirmation. What they're giving you money for is actually what we are going to be building. We'd want to release our bidding documents in July, get those bids back in early August so we could get into the ground as soon as possible this fall or the fall of 2023 in order to make sure that we can get this enclosed before the snow flies this time next year. So I think that's all I have. That is all I have for an update. Are there any questions?
Okay, questions from council members, questions, comments?
I have a couple questions. Not sure exactly who to direct them to, but under the sheet we have about the OE Gray Learning Center, item D, what is the decontamination requirements? What is there something with the existing building that is a problem?
So essentially, yeah, I mean, essentially, as kind of Laura alluded to, the building was originally a school. So when you're going from obviously a school to a, public safety emergency building, there are a lot of different components, and decontamination is one of the new ones. So there are so many new requirements in regards to how those areas have to be built, how they have to be ventilated, how they have to be designed. And so that's where, when you're looking at that, when she's talking about those areas that were specifically in red, that's a big chunk of that building that is, so when you're looking at, can you renovate something? You can, but in order to do that, it's going to be every conversation we had with either the architects or when we were going through the process of selecting the architects is they all kind of said the same thing is you certainly can renovate the building, but be prepared that right now we're looking at 13 to 15 million. If you're renovating a building, you're going to add additional costs just to do that because you're trying to factor in, that building was not built to serve that purpose. So in order to do it, there's additional specifications they have to do. There's more work that has to be done. It's just a lot more cost.
Okay, another question. With the recent survey that was done, I'm assuming it's all good news. The property lines were where they were expected. Good.
Correct.
And then my third question would be for the alternate, to do a basement. Is there potential with the space that could be used as some sort of emergency shelter or
Yes. So that's
some other use other than storage or we don't have a lot of places in the community.
Yeah, so that's one of the conversations that obviously Chief Simmons and I have had with the county is looking at potentially with that alternate is once we get the actual, if we bid it out and we get the cost, potentially then we can go after some grants that are directly related to emergency operation centers. And just as you said, it's storm shelters. So that's the potential where, once we find out what that cost is, we may be able to utilize that and go after some grants to see whether or not grants would cover that additional service.
Okay, Jason, any questions?
Nothing else right now.
Eileen?
No, I would just say that Laura mentioned the tours that we took of the two other fire stations, and it was very, very helpful, very informative in deciding how things were located within the building. You might not think that there's a lot of thought that goes into that, but boy, there were different conversations that we had over a lot of meetings and finalized what we came up with. And I think it's going to work really well.
Ken, any questions?
Yes, I have a couple questions. Excuse me. What is the proposed height of the building above ground? So you're talking about 2 stories above ground? And so what is proposed height for that portion, those 2 stories?
It's not turning. Oh, there it goes. So we aren't quite that far along yet because that we'll start looking at that more specifically once we get into schematic design. Generally speaking, though, it ends up being the apparatus bays end up being about 27 feet above the ground level. And then our hose tower for training goes up 1 more story after that. So it generally is about 35 feet.
Okay, my next question has come up, I believe. And this is the basement portion, the below ground surface. Is that a definite or that's proposed?
No, so that's what we're looking at doing is that's an alternate. So it's an option. So it's one where if, we're going to get the cost estimates, see what that would be. And depending on whether or not as a council or as a city, we want to do that, that's going to be the $1 million question is, do we feel that we can pay for that? And if there's grants to support it, maybe it reduces the cost. Otherwise, there's the potential then that it would not have a basement.
And then my next question is, as far as the old buildings there, what is that, a bike shop and so forth? That old garage and so forth, is that, that's been measured and so forth?
So that has been included in the survey. That is not included in the design. So right now,
There's no inclusion of that.
No, because we don't own that property. So we've had conversations with that property owner just because of how close obviously it is to the proposal. But what we wanted to make sure is that with the design, as you can see, we do not need that property in order to put everything that needs to be done on OE Gray's site. So it's a potential that if there comes a conversation where we want to talk about that, we have already surveyed that to make sure we know where the property lines are and where everything is. But that's a future conversation that could occur. But as of right now, we don't need that property in order to put what the proposed concept plan is on the
Okay,
site.
then in listening to this, the exit of the large equipment will be onto Adams Street?
That's correct.
And then as far as equipment coming back, it will come back over Lewis Street and it'll be drive-through for the large equipment.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then I bring up things like what's going to be the straight line winds as far as how much you're going to have for safety against straight line winds, and what's going to be also as far as the building being able to withstand tornado winds. I think that a fire station should be one of the buildings standing after high winds and tornado move through the city. In other words, everything else going. And then I'm also concerned about things like roof security. What does it take to keep a roof on a building without blowing it off because of high winds? And then my next question is what you have anticipated as far as number of personnel that might stay at the fire station in future as part of permanent personnel living at the station.
And do you want to address that one, or would you like me to?
So in the plan, Ken, there's room for 10 dorms. Traditionally, in a community our size, you would run a shift of 5. So that allows, and they sometimes are overlapping. So it allows for anywhere from 5 to 10 full-time on site with what's proposed in there at this time.
And so now, how many do you have on site now? The chief and 1 or 2 others?
Yeah, there's 2 of us right now during the daytime, during the week. I mean, ultimately it's, we're going to stay the volunteer model that we have now with those spaces available for, inclement weather for volunteers to stay there when they can, or other options. And then in the future, maybe some items like interns or stuff like that to try to postpone that time where we'd have to go full time as long as we possibly can.
But eventually there'll be space for these people.
There would be, correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
I believe those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, Todd, do you have questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, and I was on the tour, so I have no questions. We do have one person in the audience who has registered to speak. And so I will call on Bill Closter. Laura, you'll have to give up the podium for a minute.
My name is Bill Closter. I live at 975 Highbury Circle here in Platteville. I kind of started this whole thing about four years ago and bringing to the city council's attention about how badly this city needs a new fire station. The fact that a new fire station needed to be built in this community is more than 25 years old. In other words, there were discussions 25 years ago about building a new station. If you haven't been in the fire station, I encourage you to go and look. There's been a lot of discussion here about decontamination. There are a lot of chemicals in the new building products and furniture and stuff like that that do cause cancer, and cancer is one of the leading cause of firefighters' deaths. The current station had an old 2-position shower in it, but that is no longer functional because they had to block off the nozzles for that and put a washer in that space so they could wash their equipment. There is no place in that room for anybody to do any kind of decontamination after they've been in a fire and exposed to all these hazardous chemicals. There's been a lot of other things, and I don't know if I said this earlier or not, but if you haven't been to the fire station, please go there. I did say that. But the other thing is the study that was done by 5 Bugles at the direction of the city is online on the city website. There's a paper copy here in the city, and there's a paper copy at the library for you to go read. If you have any questions or doubts about what's going on here, I would strongly urge you to go read that document and see just how bad things are for our volunteer firefighters. Last point I want to make is about the basement. It's an alternate in this building. I would highly encourage, or if there's anything stronger than that, that the basement be included. The basement isn't something that you can go back and retrofit to the building. And right now, the current design, which I've been involved in working with this design, has one room for expansion. There's one room that could be changed into an office if requirements require another full-time person or some kind of special room for special equipment. I don't think that's going to be a good situation to be in when we want this building to last for 50 to 75 years. The basement would allow you to have that potential for expansion. It's a very critical thing. We have a great opportunity here when the city was able to acquire or be granted $7 million from the federal government to build this fire station. And we need to do it right. And we need to make sure the city gets what it needs. And if that has to go in digging a little bit deeper in our pockets, I think we need to do that for the better service that the city could get. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, Laura, I guess you can return to the podium. Is there anybody else that, okay, so next steps, as I understand it, is you, Adam, will be submitting the report to USDA this week.
Correct. So we got that today, that finalized report. So I will be sending that to USDA. And then essentially what we're looking for from the council is, essentially voting to say we're moving to schematic design. So essentially this was brought as information and discussion. So what'll happen now is it'll be on the November 22nd agenda as an action item. And essentially the same information will be here. We'll give Laura a pass. She doesn't have to come back again. But obviously what we would be looking for is direction as staff to be able to move forward towards the schematic design, which then, as we talked about, we have geothermal, testing that we're waiting to do. We don't want to do that or pull that trigger until we have basically gotten confirmation from the council. We have the right concept plan in sight. So that is what we're going to be looking for you as council members, is to make a motion to give us the green light to basically now move to schematic design.
Okay, any other questions from council members?
Question, but I want to weigh in on something. I realize that it'll be an vote at our next meeting, but I really want to address the elephant in the room. When we vote to go to a schematic design, we are in effect saying the OE Gray building is coming down.
That would be correct.
Yep.
Because up until now, it's been, the discussion has been, I've been approached by a lot of people that want us to evaluate keeping that building. And I just keep reassuring people, well, we haven't actually voted to do that. But I'm just want to raise the awareness that 2 weeks when we meet, if we move on this schematic design, OE Gray is coming down. And I say that with sort of a heavy heart. I have a big connection to that school. I realize it's not a historic building, but I have history with it. My kids went to school there. I've lived in that neighborhood for 30 years. But I want to balance that by saying we need this fire station. And it is, after hearing all the presentations and knowing all the work that has gone into the research, it makes sense for that location. And I want to make a comment about what Bill said. We need to do it right. And the number one priority is to make sure that our volunteer and paid firefighters have every possible safety consideration that we can possibly give them. So just my 2 cents at this point.
Okay, any other comments? Okay. Thank you, Laura. I guess you can drive off to Eau Claire. That's what I thought. All right, be careful if you drive tonight of the deer that may await you in the road. All right, we'll move into our next agenda item, which is the Senior Center City Hall discussion. So Adam.
Yeah, so obviously as we just discussed, with the concept plan for the new fire station showing the space utilization needs of the Oi Gray Learning Center location, staff have started to review options regarding location opportunities for the Platteville Senior Center. On October 25th, 2022, the Common Council had an opportunity to view the City Hall swing space as an area that could be utilized by the Platteville Senior Center. City Senior Center staff had an opportunity to review the swing space and have developed a potential floor plan, which is attached to the staff note. The Senior Center staff created a proposed site plan which showcases the following. Number one, turning the former offices located at the back of the auditorium into one large community room space. This then also would look to have easy access to the auditorium, which would be included in the design. Number two, having the back office area off 4th Street turned into a storage room. Number three, the entry off Mineral Street would become a welcome area, which would lead to the official office area and additional storage for staff. Number four, on the left side of the welcome area would lead to offices. One of those would be turned into an additional storage space. One would be converted into an exercise room, and another office in the former conference room would be combined to create a craft activity room. There would be a unisex bathroom, which would also be located within this area. Handicap accessibility would be available for all entry points into the potential facility, and additional bathrooms then would also be available on the main floor of City Hall. So parking obviously is one area of concern that will need to be discussed in more detail. City staff would develop a plan to assign spots around City Hall for senior center only parking, and city staff has already started acquiring numbers for events occurring at the current senior center location to better account for parking needs. So kind of going into the budget and fiscal impacts, if the Common Council recommends moving forward with this plan, a more detailed budget and cost estimates will need to be procured. Currently, there is $48,979.27 in funding available for when the senior center building was sold. This funding would be utilized first with the intention of creating a community room space to ensure the ability to continue activities being done by the senior center staff with minimal disruptions. Future renovations or construction projects to finalize the design would then be added to the capital improvement planning process, and staff would look to seek out grant opportunities to complete the renovation. A budgetary positive to this potential is the senior center would be utilizing an underutilized space within City Hall, which already has expenditure line items for the facility. This could, in essence, reduce budgetary line items due to not having multiple locations. With budgetary uncertainty in future years, an emphasis on utilizing underutilized spaces in the city needs to be considered. This would also allow for a transition period to move items from Oi Gray Learning Center to City Hall before construction would begin for the fire station. So again, city staff is looking for a recommendation from the Common Council as to whether we should proceed with renovations to the space to be utilized at this time for the Platteville Senior Center. City staff would recommend the space as it would allow for an underutilized portion of City Hall to gain better utilization. Further, staff feels there is a potential opportunity for the auditorium to get some increased utilization for speakers and presentations. There you go.
So I know that many of us toured that facility prior to the last council meeting. So are there questions or comments from council members? Todd, we'll start at your end this time.
I don't have any comments or questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Ken?
I favor the conversion of space for usage by the senior center. I think it's a good idea. I'm old enough that years ago I used to come up here to this council chambers and view events up here. That was back in the 50s. So this is space that could be used from time to time. The auditorium could be used. One thing I see about the auditorium is that the screening there, we had lyceums held there, and we couldn't see the screens very well as far as they were too dark. So improvements need to be done in the auditorium. So I think it's a good idea. I think we should move forward on it.
Eileen,
I would echo pretty much what Ken said, and I'm very happy that the senior center staff also had the opportunity to view the proposed site, and they really felt they could make it work for the seniors. And so to know that it would be in the city hall, it's not likely that that would be moved anytime soon. And I know the seniors have had to move a number of times. It has been difficult, you know, they have always adjusted to it, but this is a pretty good solution, I think.
Jason?
Yeah, I think the two most important things for me is that the people that are going to be utilizing the space feel that it's going to work for them, and also that that long-term consistent space for them to meet.
Hey, Kathy?
I echo all of that, and I'm just, I know while it may not be super ideal, I think it's a good location, a good option. It would become a permanent home for the senior center, and they can, with the renovations that need to take place, I think that they would actually enjoy making it their own and helping put it together they want.
And I support this. I think I agree that we have to be more consistent in utilizing the space that we have. So this returns a underutilized space to good use, and I would be happy if the auditorium and other spaces in the city hall were used more frequently. So we will move this to action for the next agenda. And I think I saw Allie here tonight. I don't know if I saw Jill or not, but Allie, thanks to you and Jill for coming up with a concept plan after you saw it and for moving forward on that. I think it's going to be a great space for you. Okay, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is a resolution for street discontinuance. This is Amar Drive and part of Calhoun Drive. Joe?
Right, so this is a portion of the Golden Heights subdivision. It was platted back in 1995, but this particular section was never developed. There's the streets were existing on paper, but they've never been installed, no utilities in this area. So the applicant has a plan to develop that portion of the subdivision. Instead of doing 10 lots, they do 4 lots. So they do not will not need that full street as it was platted. So they'd like to discontinue all of Amar Drive, basically shorten Calhoun Drive. So they need to discontinue part of that. So the 4 lots as proposed would all have street access as needed to fully utilize those lots. The Plan Commission had already basically approved the layout of that. They did a certified survey map approval back in July. That was contingent upon this street being discontinued as proposed. So this is kind of following through on that idea. Any questions?
And the applicant, Brian Laufenberg, is in the audience. Does any council member have a question on this resolution for street discontinuance? Joe, did you say that the Plan Commission recommended it at their meeting?
Did not say that, but yes, they did.
All right. Any questions on this street discontinuance? Okay, if there's no questions, that's the end of our information and discussion items. And now we'll move into a work session.